Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to be able to see so many familiar faces, but also some new faces in the audience, and just to have a really great conversation this evening. Just want to start with acknowledging that we're on Northern Country this evening, and just want to pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the audience, and then others past, present, and emerging. I know the team's been really excited to be here in Perth, and yeah, we're looking forward to watching a really fantastic conversation this evening. Before I introduce you to our panel, a couple of disclaimers off the top. So it's meant to be very casual. This isn't going to be a hard sell or an aggressive product demo. Really, we just want to lift the lid on what we're seeing, what we're hearing from our users, and what's around the corner in terms of products that we're really excited about developing or expanding in the future, and maybe some tips and tricks for those of you who are a little bit newer to Heidi on how to get started, and hopefully give you a little bit of reassurance along the way. So without any further ado, please join me up on stage, guys. Grab a seat. I'm going to sit in the middle because we have to pass this mic around. I just realised I didn't introduce myself, so I'll start with that. My name's Ben. I'm an emergency registrar by background. I work in the go-to-market team at Heidi, and I'll be your host and moderator, and hopefully be able to keep these guys in line and to time this evening. So thanks for being here, Tom.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Tom, doctor by background. I'm one of the founders of Heidi. I was never as senior as Ben. I was a vascular surgery registrar. That was my last job. I was at PGY4, so 4 years out. But yeah, before medicine I did computer science and maths, and was always very taken by AI and what it might do to practice. And yeah, pleasure to be here, and I'll tell you a lot about it.
Yeah, thanks for coming down, everyone. My name is Mo, not as senior as either of these, so I continued after my MD. So I have a paper degree in Roadshow value. So I've been at Heidi since its inception. I'm from the product team. My history is a hodgepodge of stuff. I'm particularly passionate about writing and design. Did my MD while at Heidi, finished that off in Melbourne, and founded an edtech previously. So yeah, I'm excited to show you all from the skeletons and everything else.
Thanks, Mo. Hi everyone, I'm Joss. I am part of the customer success team. I am a nurse by background, worked for a number of years in cardiothoracics. But yeah, been working in health tech for the last 7 years and been really loving it, and very excited to be with a really wonderful team here tonight, and yeah, looking forward to talking and sharing more about it with you.
Cool. So I think the first question we often get asked is about security and safety. It's top of everyone's lips, and the first thing that comes to mind when we combine AI and healthcare. We know it's super important. I think it's something that we're really confident and proud of the answers that we have to those questions. So wanted to start this evening just kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of what building an AI product in healthcare looks like responsibly. So then the rest of the discussion, we can just assume that this is table stakes for doing all of the other cool stuff that we're doing. So Tom, I'll start with you. Just your approach to safety and privacy from the get-go.
Yeah, sure. Maybe before I get into that, how many people in the room have used Heidi or used Heidi regularly? Their hands up. Right. And then who in the room have never used Heidi before and want to learn for the first time? Okay, cool. Okay, that's good. No judgment. So I think just another rehash. So in a nutshell, Heidi's transcribing the visit, listening in, creating sort of words of what's being spoken about, and then turning that into useful documentation, whatever shape that is. So if that's patient explainers, your notes, PDF forms, ideally Heidi does it all. And I think when we set out to start the company, there are a few, I think of privacy and security and just, I guess, clinical safety in a few buckets. So one bucket is how do you secure the data? So, you'll obviously see into the conversation, you have to process it, and that means that you have to, I guess, from the fundamental infrastructure, build it in a way where it's deeply encrypted, it's only stored and processed in Australia, and you have to be verified by third parties, in my opinion. So we have an external auditor that will check us that we're compliant with all of the highest standards, like bank grade security, and not just we say it, we have a trust center that's moderated by someone else. So that was something we did. I think our fourth hire was gassed out of compliance, and then there's privacy, so that's more about data usage. So, we don't sell data, we don't work with pharma, we never will. The data is for you, and like anything that we do with it is about building features and building something useful for you. And we can't access it, we can't help you. If you delete it, it's gone, we'll go too bad. And then probably the third bit where I think we're uniquely positioned to do this well is thinking about clinical safety. So I'm very excited about lots of functionality that will come, things like evidence. So based on how you practice, if you're in an area of uncertainty or you want support, you can ask Heidi, and that Ask Heidi area can become very powerful. You can reference guidelines that are within your organization, or perhaps journals that you really like, or basically whatever you want to guide your practice. And even things like drug dose calculations and all sorts of things I can imagine us doing. But I think we really understand the stakes of doing those things, and if we make the wrong choice, or if we retrieve the wrong data, or we get that wrong, obviously that's going to very meaningfully impact care. So we definitely see ourselves becoming regulated over time. Like we've been a Class 1 medical device in the UK since last year, and I think increasingly as we build more and more complex tools, that's the direction we want to go. That was always why I started the company, like before Clinicians. If you really want to do AI in healthcare, I think you have to do that. So that means all sorts of stuff that we already have, like quality management systems, monitoring how Heidi's behaving over time, like how many transcription errors are there, how many word errors are there. These are all things you shouldn't have to worry about as individuals. You should just be confident that Heidi works well, it performs reliably, and we protect all your data. That's what you should take away. But yeah, so I guess that's how I think about it. And yeah, it's definitely something that takes some seriously. Yeah.
And I want to ask Joss the kind of flip side of the coin, because your team's on the ground rolling out pilots, getting people comfortable with using Heidi. What's your approach when you're talking about, one, how do we teaching clinicians how to talk about Heidi and using it safely in practice, and maybe even just like touching on consent and how you kind of teach people to do that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ben. I think the first thing is, particularly for some of our larger organisations in hospitals, people want to know that the due diligence has been done, and I think that is often a real assurance for people that are in perhaps like smaller clinics, because they can look and say, Queensland Children's Hospital have taken on Heidi. That like gives me assurance that they've got a whole team that have done their due diligence. So I think a bit of that social proof is really helpful for people to gain trust. I think like what we're seeing on the ground is less than around 2% of patients ever decline wanting to actually have their clinician use the scribe. So I think that's a really important thing to remember, because as clinicians, often you're like worried that the patient will respond badly to it, and I think we're not seeing that. We're actually seeing the opposite response, where the sentiment from patients is like, please keep using this, because you're actually looking at me, engaging with me. Maybe you're giving me like a great patient explainer as I leave the room, whereas normally I wouldn't even get that. So I think like anchoring on those kind of experiences is focusing on like the benefit for the patient, and also for the benefit of the clinician, because no one wants to stay an extra 1 or 2 hours after they've finished their work to do their paperwork. And I think in consent, just like we have so many resources online that are printed out. They can sit them on the desk if you're in person, or you can share it in advance if it's online. So yeah, I think it's usually just a simple, do you mind if I use a scribe today? It'll allow me to actually look at you and engage with you better, and usually it's a pretty simple answer.
Back and forth is going to be interesting. And then I guess more like your kind of team is focused on building what's next, I guess, and it'd be great to just kind of get your take on how you think about building these incredible cool features that we'll probably allude to throughout the evening, but building that safely and responsibly.
Yeah, we have a pretty regimented playbook when it comes to this sort of thing now. So the way the mental model here is like there's top down and there's bottom up compliance. So top down is we go to our compliance team first and foremost, and there are bread and butter sort of boilerplate stuff we have to do. So this usually takes two flavors. It is what you do with the data, so as not to violate, GDPR standards in the European Union or APP standards here. And there are also sort of risk assessments. So the beauty of operating across all the regions is when we're building a feature, like this morning, we're thinking about how to build this new feature by simply according to the most stringent data privacy standard we operate across the European one, we cover the 8 million people. So that's beautiful. That's stuff like where is the stuff stored, how long is it stored for, how transient is it, how is it encrypted when we pass the data when it's in transit. Then there is a more sort of middle ground risk assessment. So we'll sit there with the compliance team and we'll like forward project, like likelihood trajectories, and we'll say the worst possible instantiation of this, what could go wrong? Is it, God forbid, death? Is it injury to patient? Is it X? Is it Y? And that plots us somewhere in a matrix of medical devices. So is it a class 1 medical device? Is it a class 2B medical device? And each one of those, so say the feature we worked on this morning, we said that's a class 1 medical device. So that comes with a sort of attendant, like reporting requirements, like a level of stringency. So that's all top down. Then bottom up, just compliance and law aside, we day to day have we built sort of the behavior of setting out success measures. So we'll predict, in a world where this is out facing real patients with real clinicians, what would success be in this feature? Well, it has to be used. So there are adoption metrics, and it has to work. It has to be safe. And so we have our own safety measures bottom up that we track after the fact. So yeah, top down, bottoms up. It's pretty regimented playbook now, and we're relatively sort of comfortable with it.
Thanks, Mark. All right, so we've done the nitty-gritty. We've got the security and privacy stuff out of the bag. I think the other side of the coin that when we're talking to users, it really shines through for me is just how desperately we needed something like this, and how I remember I was on a night shift in Perth when I first got introduced to Heidi, and it just blew my mind. And I think you don't realise as a clinician just how much you're trying to hold in your mind, particularly in a very hectic shift, and how you do that day to day. And then I think there's that initial aha, wow, this is incredible. But then there's also this sustained, I don't think I could go back to not having that, which we've heard a couple of times already this evening. But trying to measure that is a challenge, and trying to put a number or metrics around that is a bit difficult, because it's really just a feeling I think that a lot of clinicians intuitively get. But Josh, part of what you do is actually quantify that need and how organisations might think about assessing how much they need a tool like Heidi. Can you to tell us a little bit about that and what kind of metrics you look at?
Yeah, sure. So I think I always start back if we're working with an organisation, is what are they actually wanting to achieve, and work back from there. I think we've got common ones like time saving, quality of note output, clinician satisfaction, patient satisfaction. They're really common ones we can look at. But when we work with certain organisations, an ED in a Melbourne hospital at the moment, they wanted to look at patient throughput, and they wanted to look at time to lock note. So if that's what's important to them, let's look at that. Let's understand how they can measure that data, because we obviously have all our extensive product analytics we can look at. We do often things like pre and post surveys where we understand, approximately how much time do you spend on note taking now versus post Heidi. Overwhelmingly, that's looking at 1 to 2 hours saved per clinician each day, as we get feedback on that. I think one thing I'd call out, which really stands out for me, is we always ask the question have you actually benefited from using Heidi? Would you want to continue using Heidi? And it's just an overwhelming, but of course Heidi is what we can speak to, but just AI scribes in general as well. This is really game changing for clinicians, and has a really great impact. And the kind of, yes, there's the quantitative measures of time saving, but I think importantly as well is those qualitative measures. So we always get, feedback and quotes from clinicians, and the words that get thrown around game changer, life changing. My favorite one is Heidi, will you marry me? That's literally one of the quotes that was from a post-pilot survey recently. So that's the kind of good stuff that's really nice to see.
That's awesome. Heidi's taken, she's mine. And I think what's interesting though is like that need is not just here at home. Like we're really seeing Heidi kind of very quickly get traction in the US and the UK and Canada, and I think we're now in over 50 countries, which is really, really exciting. But Tom, I wanted to ask you, like, has the need for something like Heidi, but also like the relief that's provided not just here at home, but in lots of different markets with lots of different health systems, surprised you?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I was trying to sell people AI in 2021. I was obsessed. You know, I thought this is like, you know, better than sliced bread. And to be fair, it wasn't as good as it is today. But I think, in retrospect, a lot of what led me to start Heidi was these things. I was saying to here before that I used to record my surgical consents, because when I was explaining to a patient what we were about to do and like the things that, you know, could go wrong, it's obviously stressful for patients, and I wanted to have like evidence of what I discussed to make sure I had a good record of what we spoke about. And so, like, reflecting on just how much time I spent sitting at the desk and like thinking about everything that happened and drafting every exhausting line of what I said and the differential I considered and the negative that I didn't ask, and like it's just, you know, it's like laborious work. And none of those things were the calling or the reason that I wanted to go into medicine in the first place. You know, I feel like it's deeply about people and service. Like I wanted to be important in the community. I wanted to use my talents for good. And then, yeah, it's like somewhere along the line, there are these things that get in the way, like getting paid, like making sure the next doctor knows what I did and don't get sued. And, you know, it's just, it's like there's all of these things that take away from the joy of practice. And so, yeah, I guess now I can believe it, but going into it, I didn't really expect just the love and adoration that we would get. But one of my favorite things is there's this question in product and software where you say, how disappointed would you be if you couldn't use this anymore? And usually when we ask that question, people use Heidi regularly. It's like 80-90% say like very disappointed, like life ending, you know, I'm gonna fix something else, like, I can't go on. And I think like the best software in the world is usually like 40 or 50%. So it's really like, it's like lightning in a bottle. It's really like a moment that like I don't think I'll ever experience again in my life. So try to, you know, capture it, enjoy it, and yeah, feel humble about it. Thank you for enjoying it.
I think we've spoken a lot about like us as clinicians and what we see internally. I think we often kind of can sometimes forget about patients in these conversations because it's about improving clinician workflows and it's about improving our day. But I guess the really pleasing thing is it feels like it's a win-win-win for everyone involved, and we know that patients are, you know, increasingly really positive. And in many ways, probably surprising our clinicians in how willing they are to kind of participate and use the tool, which is, as Josh said, really, really exciting. Tom, what's been your kind of take on like bringing people along, bringing community along the journey with us as we kind of continue to innovate and like, I guess, want people to trust and feel confident with us?
Yeah, I think, I definitely think there is, you know, there is like a time and a moment where society becomes ready for things. So maybe I'm a bit ahead of that curve sometimes. But I've noticed, back to Joss's point, you know, the one of the biggest fears initially, like one of the reasons we didn't just go and build a scribe in 2021 was because I was really worried about transcribing, like will patients be willing to accept it? And I think it's some combination of COVID and like online meetings and transcribing and recording them. And then obviously ChatGPT and like the wild adoption of just these streaming tools, sort of like, I guess everyone sort of caught up. And yeah, I think about it a lot, like with what I was saying before, like evidence tools and other things that we bring into practice. It's about balancing that really deep, like clinical safety governance, like what is good, what is helpful, what are people asking for? Maybe not exactly what you're asking for, but like what's like the problem and how do we solve that in an interesting way? And then, yeah, I think a lot of it is doing events like this, speaking to people, helping them understand that it's not something to be feared, it's something that's really useful. You know, this isn't gonna take away from like the human touch. You know, Heidi can't feel a pulse. Like vascular surgery is literally the most examination oriented specialty there is. You know, cold leg, warm leg. So I definitely like deeply feel that this is an adjunct, and like if anything, we make people more present and we kind of preserve that what medicine should be, I think. So yeah, I think it's about communicating that, telling these great stories, sharing the patient experience, trying to be, you know, defensive with naysayers that often have perverse incentives, and then as we develop new exciting features, just like stay warm at the core about making care better, and making healthcare what we all think it should be. I actually think generally all clinicians have the right kind of platonic ideal. It's just how we enable that and make that happen. Yeah.
Thank you. And I guess like part of bringing the community along, and when we think about the problems that we're trying to solve, like the product and the features within it are kind of our answers to it in a really pure way. So I want to ask everyone on the panel, but I want to start with you, Mo. What's your favourite product, and maybe give us a little bit of backstory as to why you think it's so great.
Within the confines of Heidi.
Yes, I thought I was like, we need
That was meant to be obvious.
My favorite thing we've built in Heidi is probably it's specifically the offline handling mechanism on the mobile app. So it's not a thing that people see. So we had a mobile app we originally launched middle of last year, and it was dogged by a number of issues. In particular, I think the mistake we made was we didn't zero in on who is the exact kind of clinician who is most prone to using exactly this kind of like mobile app. Like we made this mistake of simply assuming that the mobile app was just like an alternate form factor of the bread and butter sort of boilerplate Heidi experience. That was a mistake. Like, in fact, the folks most likely to use a mobile app are clinicians with high throughput. They don't see patients 1, 2, 3. They sort of work circularly through patients. They're often 6 layers deep in the hospital, so they have spotty network conditions. They're mobile, they move from location to location. So like the ED archetype was by far, and represented was by far the most likely to use it. So what we did was we knuckled down, rebuilt the app ground up, and part of it was this like hectic product engineering primarily, which was gracefully handling low bandwidth, no bandwidth, low bandwidth, full network connection, low bandwidth. And that's a difficult thing to do, because classically what you do is you'd have your offline handling or your online handling, which is what we did previously. And we did that because we were zeroed in on exactly the ED archetype. So now it's graceful, no one ever notices it, which is why it works. And so yeah, it's probably not the answer you were angling for, but
That was great.
the offline mechanism on the new mobile app was my favorite release.
Mine's probably a more simple answer, which is the Ask Heidi feature, which I don't know, for those of you who have used it, it's a little bar at the bottom where you can ask Heidi to whatever you like. I particularly love it. I've worked a lot with Queensland Children's Hospital, and I really love it for doing things like patient explainers and patient follow-ups, because I think that's often something that as a clinician you don't have time to do, or don't have time to do as well as you'd like. And yeah, I really love the example at QCH where some of the clinicians would like say, can you please write a patient explainer for this 10-year-old, no, more like 6 or 7-year-old, written as if you're Louis, or written in a pirate voice. I really like that you can like kind of have fun and be playful for it, particularly with kids. So yeah, that's my favourite picture.
That's your
I'm the one asking the questions. I think context is by far my favourite feature. Yeah, well, you've got time to think about it. But I think like there's something, particularly being working in ED, and like you'll pick up a patient off an ambulance trolley or from the waiting room. They'll come in with 6 pages of notes. None of them are really coherent, or they're missing a couple of pages of the discharge summary. You've got an ambulance handover, and there's just like paperwork flying at you. Like the fact that you can just take photos through the app, otherwise upload all of it, and then I can ask Heidi to just like make sense of like
What's that called?
it's called context. Or you can, rather than talk through like a medication list with, you know, an elderly patient who's, you know, very comorbid, you can just upload the medication list into context and it'll appear in your note, and my boss is amazed at the quality of my documentation when it's all live. It's wow, your notes are so detailed. I was like, I know I spend so much time on it. But I think what that does in time is like having been in a resus bay where you've got really poor documentation that's either you can't read or like nonsensical to anyone but the person who wrote it, like raising the bar and the kind of the depth and quality of that documentation is actually going to save lives. And I think like that to me is like why I left the hospital to kind of work at a company like Heidi, is to kind of, that's going to make a really incremental shift. One, it's going to be, we're going to delight in it, you know, every session, but it will come to a point in that patient journey where that extra level of detail is going to really make the difference. So,
yeah, and then I guess my favorite one is templates. I know they're complicated, but I like that. So, so the initial, very early on, this was probably the start of last year, we had a fork in the road decision with templates. There's two choices. One choice was to make it very kind of bubbly and pre-configured, and you do drag and drop, but it would really limit what was possible. So it would kind of box you in, like you could only do the things that we had the idea to build ahead of time. And the choice we made then, which I reflected on a lot since, is I'm willing to basically give everyone the tools to the road, like give them full complexity. We'll create this system with instructions and placeholders, and like, yes, maybe for some it will be just too much. But we'll erase that with people like Joss and myself, and like setting up templates and being like just, you know, unreasonably great at customer success. But what it means is that it enables kind of any possibility for any scenario. It doesn't matter what kind of clinician, you can get Heidi to do what you like. To Ben's point, you know, in a template, you can tell Heidi what to do with the context. You can literally write to it and say, hey, the context is yesterday's note, or the context is I'm in ED resus and this is really complicated. And Heidi will use that and process it completely differently based on the instructions you put in the template. It was sort of a way for us to give the flexibility of these AI tools to everyone, where I think essentially like no competitive tool around the world, and there are like 1,000 of them, they all chose the bubbly path of like not giving, basically they didn't give the clinicians the power. They infantilized everyone and thought that you guys couldn't figure it out. And what happened was that everyone did figure it out. So the template community is a good example of, if you haven't looked in, you should. So click into the community tab and you'll just see this immense collection. This like people have already built what you want, most likely. If you search for it, you'll find it. Every assessment, dental examination, OT assessment, VT assessments, like you name it, there's probably one in there. And if there isn't, we'll build it for you. And yeah, I was just very proud of that. It was like a small product choice. I kind of like backed the clinicians would figure out the complexity and the power was worth it, and it really paid off. Yeah, so I always think about that as like some trade-off of ease versus giving people the power. Yeah, we know it's perfect, but that was about it. Great answer.
I think, judging by the kind of show of hands at the start, most of the people here have used Heidi kind of written, or at least are partway over the hump of kind of adopting and figuring out a new tool and where that fits into your workflow. But I think like everyone in the room is going to help us kind of manage the change and kind of manage expectations of our colleagues or our patients throughout that process. And I think a large part of our rollout process and pilot process is identifying, you know, like-minded people who can really see the vision and bring people along for the ride. And I wanted to just like ask Joss, like our clinical champions, like one, can you explain a little bit about them, but also like what makes like that peer-to-peer support so important, and maybe some words of wisdom for everyone here who we hope will continue to champion Heidi in their day-to-day work.
Thanks, Ben. Well, I take a wild guess that a lot of people here are probably the champions already. The fact that you're actually here joining this event, engaged, like you probably are the champions of your community as well, or already. But I think the importance of people like yourselves is it can't be undermined, because example, I ran a training this morning with a group we work with in New Zealand, a group of health coaches, and I was there to like run the training, explain to them how it works, like really tailor it to how it works in their particular workflow. But what was more powerful is having someone there that already uses Heidi, loves it, and getting her to share that with her colleagues. And having someone like her speak to her peers is way more powerful than some random they haven't met before, telling them like this is going to be really helpful for them and like saving a lot of time in their day and hopefully give a better experience for both of them in their life, but also for their patients. So I think it's a very powerful thing having that peer-to-peer influence, and it's definitely something when we're doing rollouts, say for example in a public hospital, we'll always, we need a really strong project team. That's really important. Having someone clinical, having someone technical and operational. We'll always like have those three buckets in our rollout team. But also having those key champions in departments is really instrumental, because you need people on the ground when someone's on a night shift. Who are they going to go to? They're probably going to go to one of their peers and be like, this isn't working, or like, can you help me? How would you approach this? I think that's a really powerful thing. And we've certainly got things like video testimonials or people showing how they've used Heidi and sharing that across a clinic or organisation. So if you're not there one-to-one, having them as like little video testimonial is a really powerful way that we've seen work well as well.
Thank you. And like, I guess like that is the first step along the path of really showing we can have an impact and a measurable impact, on outcomes, not beyond just efficiency. And we're really excited about a study that's been done and about to be published by Queensland Children's Hospital that was kind of analysed us against the quintuple aims of health. And for those of you who don't know what they are, I've got them here in front of me. So it's improving patient experience, improving population health, reducing per capita cost of care, improved health professionals experience, that's us, and improved health equity. I wanted to ask you, Tom, one, can you tell us a little bit more about, maybe give us a teaser of what that study showed and the outcomes of that, but what you think that points to as we continue to push to roll out and partner with more and more, particularly public hospitals across the country?
I'm really excited for that one to come out. I mean, it's basically just evidence of what everyone here already sort of knows intuitively. Patient experience, universally better if Heidi's being used, more eye contact, more issues covered in the one encounter, more likely to follow up and actually come back and do the thing because they have explanations of why they need to go get that blood test or imaging or whatever comes next. From a one thing that I was, interested in was the population health equity standpoint, because one of the questions we get a lot is about how these AI tools are trained, how do you make sure they're representative in the population. Actually, the same thing, it had the inverse effect of maybe what the general populace or news would have you say. It actually improved health equity outcomes. It normalized that, because I think a lot of the inherent biases that we have as clinicians show up in the notes. And so when you write your notes, you double down on your biases. But when Heidi writes her notes, if you've missed things or you've just like jumped and assumed that the young woman with abdominal pain doesn't have an ectopic pregnancy, the note that Heidi writes actually helps influence the clinician to be more objective because there's a consistency across visits. Very happy about that. Looking forward to some of those things coming up. Note quality as well was very interesting. Notes are far better with Heidi than without. All of the things around hallucination, accuracy, actually AI does better than most of the doctors on accuracy, which is kind of crazy. There, of course, it isn't perfect. AI scribes make mistakes in unusual ways and that are different to how humans make mistakes, but far less frequent. So the most common ones and these ones to watch out for is, of course, it is a transcription. So sometimes there are mishearings, like factual misses. So you still need to check it. There's no way around that. And so that when there isn't checking or someone is just, like hands-free and just letting Heidi go, that can be a problem because if we mishear something, we'll get something wrong. What else? Clinician experience, of course, saw more patients, save time. So I think it will become overwhelmingly obvious that every clinician will practice with an AI tool. I think patients will start to expect it and will think it's weird if a clinician's not using one of these tools. especially by end of the decade, you know, imagine, like, you know, I was on the Dean's Honours list, I was good at diagnosis, so, you know, I studied a lot, but for me, like when I see what some of these models can do, they can definitely make me better, and they can fill my gaps, and they can protect me when I'm hungry, tired, late, some combo, you know, like it's very obvious, I think, when you use them. And again, it doesn't replace me, like it's not a dereliction of duty, like I am the steward of the technology, like reading a guideline or using a record, like this is the same thing. But I think it's back to convincing public hospitals. I think the public will over time. Like if you're going to see a specialist in GP, it's this amazing experience, and you go to see an outpatient clinic, it's like, why do you have to have writing notes? I don't get it. So yeah, it's part of is advocacy, proving it in a real way. That's that clinical pillar. Like we take that seriously. Like what's the efficacy? Have evidence and trials around the world, all the different features we have, prove that they work, prove they're safe, reliable, etc. But then, yeah, I think it will take a few years, but it'll happen.
And now for the exciting stuff, and with an eye to the future, Mo, I'd love to kind of finish this session, this section of the panel, just with maybe a teaser for everyone here. What are we thinking about? What's around the corner? And you know, without any commitments of timelines and stuff, but like, what are you most excited about? That's coming next.
You've got 5 minutes. No, so the question going to execution. So a question I ask myself a lot is, you know, what separates slipshod, like feature factory products from like really like beautiful pieces of software that are the cornerstone of your day. And you know, as a team, you know, we're 15 in the product team and 60 engineers. We get more feature requests per day than we'll ever have time to do. Like if we just stop and we did everything that was asked of us in a day, it would take us years. So for me, it's been very important for us as a company to reverse engineer from like some world, like some like vision of clinical practice, and kind of like disprove that as we go along. So, you know, in an ideal world, everyone here isn't touching a keyboard or a mouse. All the data you need about your patients are somewhere there, exactly as you need them, exactly as sort of the clinical story unfolds itself, are being deliberately vague because, like, who knows what device that is on, who knows what year this is. So this has always been the thing for us. A long time ago, we thought the answer to solving this was machine learning. That the zeitgeist has changed. That's not the case anymore. So the way we see it, that's always been the North Star. And then every feature we build, every tiny little thing, improvement to voice settings or templates or the template community, is just another thing that lets us like disprove or prove that North Star. So in pursuit of that North Star, the next step for us is this. Today, Heidi is, for all intents and purposes, it's like overly reductive. It's a scribe. You know, it helps you do your documents probably faster than you would have done that, probably better than you would have done that. We think it's very good at that, but for all intents and purposes, that's what it is. But what I want is, as you see a patient with an increased oxygen requirement post-op, it's calculating the pre-test probability in the background. It already knows about the patient who was attached to your EHR. As the story unfolds itself, you know, it does a Wells, and then it runs a PD protocol. It drafts your labs, your FBE, your coax. It orders a CTPA. So as you're doing it, and then it's sort of like your partner. You might say, actually, I think it's an encephalopathy because of this thing that we gave them post-op, and then redirects what it tried to do. And all the time, it's like moderating itself. It's saying, well, I can do this. I can calculate something because that's safe. I can't prescribe something that's not safe, but I can fill out an order that is safe. So it's always like balancing the safety profile of what it's doing. And then it orders what it needs to order, does your documentation, and for the people who care, maybe it's like code stuff for you. So the question for us as a team is, okay, people like this scribe, but documentation is not why I get up in the morning. It's getting clinicians away from their keyboards and mice. So there are two streams of work, well, there are three streams. The boring one is there's a lot of day-to-day maintenance of the product that is there. That's probably the brunt of the work that is done. Second stream of work is to run that P vignette I kind of just alluded to. There are lots of other things Heidi needs to be able to do. Like it needs to be able to do math, like real math, not LLM math. Like it needs to actually calculate and chat basketball balls, or whatever the case may be. The other thing it needs to do is it needs to connect to all of the EHRs. So this is why I began with this prelude of the North Star, because what we've told, we have a team entirely dedicated to connecting with all the PMSs and the electronic health records. As far as the clinicians and organizations are concerned, it's just going to make life marginally easier by being able to push a note into the EHR. What we've told our team is, we need to hit this vision, you need whatever degree of integration with Epic or Cerner or best practice that lets us fulfill that vision eventually. We need to be able to submit orders. So we're speaking with all the EHRs, they're giving us the APIs, we need to fill out orders without submitting it. So that's the second stream point. It's just the group tools that form this cacophony of work. And then the third thing is, we call it a central, an internal SDK. That's a fancy way of saying it's the part of the code base that orchestrates what tool to use at what point. So here's something, it's calculating stuff. It says, actually, now I should calculate something. Now I should retrieve this data. Now I should push this data. Now I should fill this out. If the patient's family asks for mortality data, it's querying up to date or our own evidence base, or there's what we call a brag layer that sits over a knowledge base that retrieves an answer. And everything is there exactly at the point you need it. Now, we don't get to that by the start of 2026, but clinicians will see this as individual feature improvements of Heidi. Life is going to get slightly better. You'll be able to query a knowledge base, maybe your hospital's DKA guidelines, maybe we'll be able to do operative reports because we have the equipment, the gauze and the sutures you like to use. But eventually, once we build these pieces out through 2026, early 2027, we synchronize them together, and hopefully we have a living, breathing version of Heidi that's listening as you're doing what you need to do. That's kind of what I'm excited about. So to answer your question, that was more than Ben wanted. To answer your question, the first two things we're going to string together are the Scribe as it is today, and the separate calls feature we're working on. So hopefully for certain kinds of clinicians, probably not ones in public hospitals yet, the patient will be able to speak in natural language to a version of Heidi that's a phone call that's going to enter the context field in Scribe, and that's going to hopefully produce better text artifacts. So a tiny little integration, but that's for us. When that happens in November, that's the first material step to this thing we're going to achieve in 2 years.
Everyone wants to summon India. I'm conscious we've gone for a bit over half an hour now, and I want to make sure that we give everyone his time to ask some questions. So I'm going to hand over to the audience. The floor is yours. If you've got questions, please. Bridgie.
I'm curious to know what's, in terms of, you said that you want to embed public hospitals. What's the biggest barrier that you're facing right now for actually getting
Good question. I think mainly it's this. The decision makers thinking through how to procure the tools is one aspect. So sometimes they might not have had, before, let's say last year, they definitely didn't have AI scribes in the category that they felt like they had to have. So new thing. So then in that kind of system, obviously they're representing the public, they're government funds, there has to be a really strong justification for why would we buy this? Why would we spend taxpayer dollars? So I think the main thing is demonstrating real efficacy. It's all very well if this is, a vitamin, it's a nice thing, clinicians love it, but what's the brass tacks? Is it really helping you see more patients? Is it, what's the, if I'm doing a profit and loss, how does this make the hospital better? And it's it's evidently clear, it's very obvious, they'll churn less staff, they will see more patients. I think we did a study in Canada where in a single ED, one intervention, the specialist saw, I think, 17% more patients, which is crazy. That is wild things for one piece of software, just, hey, try this out, not much training, and they're seeing, 1 in 6 more patients. So I think it's just proving that, and then as that proof gets established, it's okay, we need to buy this, that's step one, you have to build that consideration, and then they'll go through a tender process, and that just takes time. I think it makes sense. Like they want to make sure they're using funds appropriately, so they'll build out the tender. They'll engage with partners like us, understand how do we actually buy this and what it would look like. And then we win. There's something like that. Yeah.
So nothing that comes up around risk, something like that, like.
Actually, not really. Like for sure, like I'd say AI is the category. Like they may well have like safety officers and people who are just dedicated thinking about. Like well, of course, like that's a key part of the procurement. I would say, like you know, yeah, how are you using that data? What are our obligations? You know, what are the insurance needs? But we've solved a lot of that already. Like we have insurance. Like you probably don't even know, but when you use Heidi, like we're insuring you for your use of Heidi. We a lot of it's solved, but they don't know that. So they can be very scared and uncertain. But I think it's more important to build the consideration, and then we can kind of get them there on the rest of it because we've done it before. It's they have them buy one first. Yeah. Yeah.
So you speak?
Go for it.
Okay, so I'm a clinical pharmacist and I visit patients at home, so thank you. I use it on my phone and it's been amazing recently. And it's amazing. I love it. And by the way, Heidi is my best friend, but I tried to use it for telehealth. What am I doing wrong? Can I use it for telehealth or not? Like, it's amazing, but I just couldn't do it. I had to get prescribed it and maintain it. It was just really hard. Maybe it's just me.
So the difficulty is it's a technical limitation that we haven't completely solved, except in a very like specific way. I'll tell you in just a second. So usually Heidi will hear whatever you hear. It's about us. You have your phone down. As much as Joss can hear about conversation, that's what Heidi will hear. The difficulty with telehealth is that we need to ingest system audio. So it's like dual channels and like mingling them into a single threaded thing. So the only, we've released the desktop app. So if you go to HeidiHealth.com/download, there's a desktop app. And what that does, it's the only version of Heidi we've managed to ingest both sides of the audio. So everything you'll
Leave it phone.
yeah, not the mobile phone just yet. Do you do how do you do telehealth?
Yeah, because I got a phone communication using my phone. I couldn't do the Zoom VPN. I call people on a phone.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do it because I was trying to Skype, phone, I did it all. I've done it all.
So
Yeah.
we do expect to have what we call a VoIP solution.
Yeah.
Basically, fancy way of saying Heidi will listen to the phone
Yeah.
call.
Yeah, that's not quite.
If our compliance team gives us the
It's
blessing.
not a problem. It's
Yeah.
not a problem. It was just maybe I thought I was doing something wrong.
No.
I hadn't found the right, you know.
That's
But having said that, at home, this morning, one of my patients actually cried. A 79-year-old man said to me, "I've never had a clinician focus on me so much." So I think you should take that because I literally said, "I don't write anymore so that I can focus on you."
Yeah.
And the guy had to like, he is the owner of one of the biggest firms in Australia, one of the richest men in Australia. And he literally replied and said, "I've never known anyone to focus on."
That's all. Very good shit.
I think that was amazing.
Yeah. And so one little idea.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a workaround, it is a bit of a pain, but if you set up call through a web app, so there's like air call and just call, like
Yeah, right.
you can do it, and the desktop app, it does work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you have to call through your computer,
Yeah.
transcribe with the
Yeah.
desktop, and it works. But
I
it is a
want to
bit of,
transcribe using my notes app and.
but we know. We will build some sort of data.
No, it doesn't need to be. It's just that it was just the one thing I applied.
No, it does.
I
No.
No, but look, it's amazing anyway. But having said that, it was just using it on the phone has been a game changer. Okay, sorry to use that word again. But honestly, my patients telling me are amazing. Because all I say to them is, I don't write anymore. You know? So it's just, honestly, I'm grateful.
Thank you. All right, question? I think we have
I was just going to ask, if I had a sophisticated and
Can they tell me what about you? What is that something you can do? I'm sure Sandra. Look, what you do is up to you. Yeah. So actually, there is a way to use Heidi where I think it's like generally okay, which is if you're doing some like layer of de-identification, because then there's absolutely no. It's like it's like you're using I don't know, like your notes app or something. So if you're using just letters as the name, and you're taking care in the visit to not mention identifiable stuff, then yeah, sort of. But I'd say the organisation still won't love it. So look, it's a tricky thing. My heart, like I was thinking, okay, off the record, if you're recording. Like I was the surgical registrar that I recorded in voice memos. I used WhatsApp. I just like needed to practice. I didn't really care that much. That's part of the DNA of like why we just gave clinicians access to the tool and sort of asked for forgiveness. But obviously, I'm sure you already have. But introduce us to your organisations. We are incredibly considerate. It doesn't matter if you're on free or pro or whatever. Like we still treat everyone the same. And yeah, there's like a bit of a loophole. Like if you de-identify it sufficiently, it's probably okay. But they're still totally not to use it myself.
Is there a way, like after a procedure, you can just quickly, like say roughly what you need, and then it does, instead of like consultation, but more like being clinical?
Yeah. That's how I use it a lot in emergency. So I'll do a procedure and I'll have a procedure note, and it's just like I just hit transcribe. It's like a stream. You just kind of talk through what you did step by step, and you'll document that as a separate one. So you can set that up.
Do you need to use like a separate
Just a separate template, but it's literally just a transcribe button. It's not similar to dictation, but not. If you just talk through the steps of what you've done, it will kind of put that into in a procedure note or.
And we do have laptops up the back, so
Yeah,
we can show you some of these things.
Yeah.
But the way I like to do it is, so you'll see the title of your template, like soap or H&B issues, and if you click on that, it comes up a little box, and it looks like a search. But actually, you can just type for whatever you want. So what I used to do is I would say, luckily I don't do this anymore, but hey, hi Heidi, I just did a routine fourth toe amputation, and here's what I did, and it was uncomplicated, and there wasn't much bleeding, and blah, blah, blah. And then in the template, so I click stop, and then in the template, I just type, literally free write, like toe amputation operative note, and then there's we can show you at the back, but there's basically like a generate with AI. So you don't need to have built a template. You can just ask what you want on the fly. It is a bit more variable because you haven't told them exactly what you want and how to structure it, but you can just click it and it will just one shot. It's pretty good. And it works like for anything. So if you're doing a tooth extraction, whatever you're doing, you just have to type what you need. But if you're doing it consistently, like you're always doing the same thing, a template's the best way. You just copy the old node or ask. Go into the template library and create one, and you should be able to.
I'll just throw a few more questions, but what we might do is we might wrap up, let everyone grab a drink, and then we'll continue questions come up.
I'm working at farms and things like that. So if I'm using the app and I just have my earbud in, if I lose what's what I'm thinking
Like connection,
reception, will it still keep recording? Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll record offline, then once you're back in signal, it will then transcribe the note for you.
Yeah. So you can still stop it, you can press pause, and then when you get back into reception, you just have to go back. Sometimes you might have to quick retry or something just to get
Press what, sorry?
like retry. Sometimes it should just work, but sometimes you need to click another go.
Yeah.
But it will work. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. We'll wrap up there, but thanks everyone for your attention. It's great to see so many of you. Please stay, have a drink. As we said, we've got a laptop or two up the back that we can go through specific product problems. But yeah, thanks so much for being here. It's great to see some of your faces. Cheers.
Thank you.